Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Decloak podcast. And today's guest is Andrew Wilder, CSO of Community Veterinary Partners, Board of Directors, Adjunct Professor at Washington University. Did I say that correctly, Andrew?
Yep. Yes, you did.
And through my research of Andrew, there are so many accolades, so many notable titles, mentions, associations. Really, I could have been here all day, Andrew, and I think that's testament to a really good career that you've had and also the influence you've had within the wider community of cyber. And some notable accolades: the CCISO Top 50 Hall of Fame. Wow. And obviously being a LinkedIn Top Information Security Voice, someone that I've followed and been aware of for a while. And it's an absolute privilege and an honor to have you on the podcast. So yes, Andrew, how are you? Everything okay?
I'm doing great, Leo. I appreciate you having me today. Thanks for all the recall of my accolades. I appreciate that very much, and glad to be here.
Excellent. And we'll jump straight in then with a brief overview of you and your career. Obviously, some items that I've touched upon, but yeah, talk me through your career and any career advice you could give anybody within the industry.
Sure. So as this is a podcast about entering the industry or career advice, I'm going to give the full story. So if you've seen me on a podcast before, this is the longer version, and I may have told this once or twice before. So if you want, you can skip to the next part of the podcast. So have you ever seen that TV show, The Office, Leo?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So our story starts in a scenario not unlike the Dunder Mifflin Paper Company. So I grew up in San Diego, and one of the first jobs that I had out of school was as a customer service rep for a paper company. And it was a small company, so because of that, I ended up doing everything. I did finance, I did marketing and sales, I did inventory. When we were really busy, I would go out into the warehouse and drive the forklift and pick pallets and put them on the trucks to ship them out. And because of that, I knew how the entire business operated from beginning to end, which was an interesting thing to understand early in your career. Yeah. So one day, the owner of the company comes to me and he says, "Hey, Andrew," he says, "we're going to replace our old mainframe computer systems with Windows servers and Windows workstations." And I said, "Okay, that sounds good." And he said, "You're the youngest guy, so you get to work on this project." And I said, "Well, fine, I appreciate your logic there." Now, at the time, there weren't like data conversion programs. The internet was very young. So everything that I did was by hand. I just did all the data entry by hand to convert all the tables from the mainframe system to the Windows-based system. And it took me, 2 or 3 months working nights and weekends and stuff. But eventually, one day, we go live with this new program. And for me, in my very young career, it's like a huge wake-up call for me. And I realized this is so satisfying. Maybe I should do this IT thing as a career. So I saved up some vacation time, I saved up some money, and I ended up going to Chicago, Illinois in the winter time, which for a guy from San Diego is a rude awakening in itself, for 2 weeks for a Microsoft boot camp where you would take 7 exams. And at the end of that 2 weeks, I passed all 7 exams, and I came home with my Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer paper. And I don't know if you remember this, but back in the early 2000s, this was really resume gold for people who wanted to get into IT. So I put my resume out all over the country. I got picked up by Hewlett Packard in Atlanta, Georgia, doing a cybersecurity project with Bank of America. And on my first day in, and also, again, the youngest guy, I'm the project manager of a team of 15 IT professionals who've been doing this for years. And here's me, new guy coming in who just did 2 weeks in the MCSE and one project that I did before. But I took it and I ran with it. And so I stayed with HP for a number of years as a cyber consultant, worked with Bank of America, worked with Nestle, the food company, and worked with DHL, the logistics or shipping company. And ended up getting job offers from all 3 of them, which was nice. Obviously, I was doing a fairly good job. And I ended up taking the job at Nestle because I really loved their culture. They had a very collaborative culture. We're all here together. We're all here to do the best to get food to the people that need it, kind of thing. And ended up staying at Nestle for 18 years. Just had kind of progressive leadership roles. So started out managing their information security team for their largest business unit. Nestle USA. And then about every 2 or 3 years, I'd just get more team, more scope, more budget, more responsibility. When I left Nestle in 2021, I was the regional CISO of Americas, Asia, and Europe. And I had a team of about 60 people around the world, and a really fun role, really great company. But my boss at Nestle was very transparent with me. And he said, look, he said, your next job is my job as the global CISO, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not too old. I'm healthy. I like where I'm at. I don't have any ambition to try and do this somewhere else. Not that he is not an ambitious guy, but he was happy with where he was at.
Yeah.
And he said, if you want to advance in your career, you probably need to go somewhere else. Let me help you to find a job at another company where you can be the global CISO. So he did. So I went to a company called Hillenbrand, which is an industrial manufacturing company based in Indiana. Rebuilt their security program from the ground up. When I started, they had 1 employee in cybersecurity, built the team up to 15. I did a few different things there. A value realization program, a cybersecurity basics maturity program, and then kind of a cybersecurity next level maturity program. And that was a lot of fun and made a lot of good progress there. And then for the last year, I've been a retained CISO at a group called Community Veterinary Partners. And again, came in and kind of built things from the ground up, security basics. The nice thing about CVP is we're owned by a private equity company, and they do a cybersecurity assessment of us every month. And so when I first started, we were at 52% on their cybersecurity scale. As of today, we're at 89%.
Wow.
So over a period of just about a year, I've been able to increase the security score by, I don't know, almost double, something like that, but really, really improve the maturity of the organization. So that's me and my career in a nutshell.
Nice. And in terms of it seems like a lot of these roles you've been somewhat of a builder of these functions and teams. And talk me through what it's like day one when you go into a scenario and you maybe need to scale something. Talk me through your strategy and your approach to evaluate.
Yeah, so one of the first things you want to get is you want to understand what's been going on previously. So any audit reports, risk assessments, penetration tests, current roadmaps, all that kind of stuff. You want to get your head around what's been happening. The other thing that you want to do is you want to talk to people. You want to build relationships, but you also want to understand from their perspective what's going on, what could be better, all those kind of things. And then you take all of that input and you kind of melt it down and you say, okay, here's the 1 or 2 or 3 things, let's say 3 things maximum that we can do now to start making the biggest difference. And you get the board or the C-suite behind it. You get the funding for it. You get the resources and the skills for it. And then you start doing those things. And there's a great book that we read at Nestle called My Iceberg is Melting. And it's a story about executing huge enterprise-wide change in organizations. It's really about change management. And one of the key things in that book, My Iceberg is Melting, is about getting quick wins. So if you can start with some kind of big blocks or big rocks, if you will, and get those things out of the way, then you can get the momentum behind it, you can get the team behind it, you can get the whole business behind it, and everybody starts to see, hey, this is the way, we're doing the right thing, we're moving forward. The other thing about a security roadmap is you need to be really flexible with it, because you will get other things that come in. You'll have an incident that requires you to pivot. You'll have a risk assessment or a pen test or something that requires you to pivot. So be open to constantly changing that plan. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that you were bad at estimating or whatever. It just means the bad guys are in charge of our destiny, Leo, not us. So as they change, the landscape, we need to react to them.
Yeah, and I think quite a lot of cyber leaders tend to try and look at maybe a year, 2 years in advance when it comes to a plan. But as you say, anything can come along and derail it. You could have budget changes. You could have strategic initiatives that just supersede everything else that's going on. Again, you could have anything that could effectively derail that. And you need to be adaptive. Yeah,
for sure.
And in terms of challenges that you faced within the industry, Andrew, talk me through some of those.
So I think the biggest one, especially earlier in my career, was being looked at as the junior person, even as a leader, the junior person. So trying to kind of win the respect of my team at Bank of America, who again were all more experienced than me, all older than me, had all been doing this for a while. And here comes this new guy that comes in, and he's now the project manager for this project that you're working on. And how do you earn that trust? So for me, it was really about relationship building, getting to know them, getting to know what motivated them, showing them that I was there. Most of the team worked like a swing shift. So they'd start around, I don't know, 4 in the afternoon and work until like 10 or midnight to do these vulnerability programs. And I had to work with the business and with the team. So I was starting in the morning, but I would stay with them through the time they were doing their job. So they also got to see, boy, this guy really cares about us and he wants what's best for us. I consulted with them. I bring them in. There's a great quote that Steve Jobs says. He says, we don't hire good people to tell us what to do. We don't hire good people to tell them what to do. We hire good people to tell us what to do.
Yeah.
And so I really tried to engage them in the decision-making and the improvement process and things like that. And, I faced that very early in my career, but I faced that throughout my career as well. Always having to earn your seat at the table to show that you were strategic, you were a business person, and by the way, you also happen to be a cybersecurity expert and a great leader, but that you understood business acumen as well. So I think that's kind of the challenge. And certainly I think a lot of my CISO peers face that today, trying to get into the boardroom and get the respect of the board and the C-suite and understand business strategy before it's happening. Because the best way to build a roadmap and a cybersecurity program is to understand those things that are most important to the business and secure the things that are most important to the business and show how you're supporting that. But if you just come in as the IT guy or the security nerd or whatever, and you just, you speak, in a bunch of strange acronyms and things like that they don't understand, then you're always going to be seen that way. But if you come in and say, look, the key priorities for the business are, order to cash and revenue growth and e-commerce, and here's the 3 ways that we're supporting those things through cybersecurity by protecting the websites and all that kind of stuff, then you can be seen as, hey, this is someone who's on the same side as us, and maybe we should bring them in at the early level in strategic planning and stuff like that. So hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a previous guest, and they stated that one of the first things that they wanted to look at was an MBA, because then they could clearly translate or wrap up cyber jargon or talk and make it translatable at that level. And I think it's always going to be a challenge for cyber leaders or anyone that's placed in front of a board or chief executives to try and make items actionable. But again, you've put things very simple, like, again, the e-commerce part of it. If you don't protect these items, and that impacts revenue, impacts share price, stability, and these things I think are quite often missed. We always talk about it, we always hear it in podcasts, but the minute someone goes in front of executives, they revert back to their inherent nature of speaking about endpoints and web application firewalls and things that people are like, imagine trying to have a conversation with someone who maybe oversees marketing or legal. They're going to be like, what's a WAF? Back to the acronym part. So I like that, in terms of, you need to make these things relatable. And, is there anything else in terms of your challenges? Like, obviously you've had a really good career. What happens when it goes wrong? What have you had to do when, say, you've tried to launch a cybersecurity program and it's just not taken off? Talk me through if you have any type of scenario like that. Yeah.
Trying to think of a program that I've done that hasn't taken off. I've certainly had things go wrong in my career, but I don't know that I can think of a program that I've done that hasn't gone off. But I think I'll tell you about something that went wrong in my career. So we were trying to do multi-factor authentication for about 300,000 employees. And that's a big ask. And it was not actually a security project. It was supposed to be a project that was done by the IT team, but they didn't have the team or the resources to do it. And we were pushing for this project, and they said, hey, you guys are pushing for it, you guys do it. So my boss said, okay, we'll do, Andrew, you'll do it, or we'll do it. So we started this program, and the problem that we had was adoption, because if like the effectiveness of email, it's like 20% gets read. And how do you effectively communicate with huge organizations? It's really difficult to do that. And so understanding communication and change management, which you wouldn't think are necessarily really big CISO things, but understanding those things is huge to be able to roll out big programs. So we tried to roll out MFA, and we were getting like really low adoption. And the idea is at one point you want to just turn it on to make it a requirement. But if you do that and only 20% of the organization has adopted it, you're going to have 80% of the organization calling the service desk, and you can't have whatever that number is, I don't know, 200 and something thousand people calling the service desk. So what we ended up 240,000. So what we ended up doing is as I researched change management and communication and things like that, we tried to pilot, and the idea was to get a top-down approach. So I went to one of the CEOs of one of the different business units, and I said, hey, we're trying to do this thing. You understand the importance of it, but the people in your organization don't. And we're communicating to them, but they're ignoring us. If you could just, in your next town hall or the next time you send a note to the entire organization, if you could just include like, hey, there's this MFA thing. It's really important for security. It'll take you 5 minutes. Please take the time to do that. And we didn't have approval to do that for all of the CEOs worldwide, but I just did it for this one to see kind of how it would work. And of course, within like a week, that business unit was up to like 80%, which was the fine number to turn them on. So we turned them on, that business unit was secured. And then I said, look, we piloted this model. We're going to try this with everybody else. So for the most part, going forward, all of the business units, their CEO would do a similar thing, and we'd get huge adoption rates going in. So I guess that's something that didn't work, and maybe the lesson learned around it.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to take a couple of minutes and talk about today's sponsor, which is Vanta. Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Through my experiences of using Vanta, Vanta automates compliance. It covers everything from SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and many more, saving you time and money, while helping you build customer trust. I love all the insights that it gives me, covering everything from asset management, my control failures, audit status, even vulnerabilities from other connecting systems which have been integrated into the platform. Having a centralized place for something like an ISO program has been a godsend for me. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Why Vanta? With over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora, they all use Vanta to manage risk and provide security in real time. So, my listeners can claim a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/decloaked. That's vanta.com/decloaked. Thanks. Yeah. And again, sometimes these changes are small, incremental, or you do them in isolation, show proof of value, and then these things kind of scale out. But yeah, it's a large user base as well. So yeah, in terms of a specific topic that you want to discuss that you feel needs relevance or clearing up, yeah, back at you.
Yeah. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about today is identity.
Yeah.
And I know that it's a broad topic, and I've been doing identity as part of cybersecurity for more than 20 years. So the first role that I had with Nestle was automating identity, then rolling out like a HR to IAM system that would automate it fully. So really been doing that since the beginning, and understanding the difference between human identity and non-human identity, machine identity, and now we have so much of SaaS identity. And then how do you get a control of that? And what we're seeing a lot today, and one of the use cases that I see for SaaS identity is, imagine a scenario where someone leaves the company. So let's say you have SailPoint, right? And you have single sign-on for the majority of your apps. And so you have Susie, and Susie retires. Okay, congratulations to Susie. She's going to go work in her garden now. That's great for her. So Susie retires. We get the feed from HR. Okay, Susie retires on June 25th. It automatically goes into SailPoint, and it says, hey, Susie's retired. Let's cut off her access. And her Active Directory or Azure AD, Office 365, Salesforce, whatever the stuff we have logged in single sign-on, it all gets cut off. Well, you know what happens next week? Susie says, I forgot that I saved something in my corporate Dropbox account. So Susie logs in, corporate Dropbox account, gets right in, username and password, and she's in, and she's able to download the thing that she needs. Well, thankfully, Susie is a nice person, and she reports it back to IT, and they go and they clean up her access to Dropbox. But the scenario that I'm talking about, this happens every day, thousands of times a day, all around the world, maybe hundreds of thousands of times a day. And it's what I call like levers access or SaaS sprawl. And it's not only for apps that are not on single sign-on, it's also for apps that you think are on single sign-on, but somebody has username and password to get into that app. So they can still get into it after you think all their SSO access is cut off. So it's that kind of levers access. And if you look at, public breaches that we've had, there's all kinds of password lists out there. There's all sorts of people using their corporate credentials for things that they probably shouldn't be. And so you can do those kind of password stuffing attacks. And you can go in, hey, I'm leo.cunningham@company.com, and I'm going to try to log into Dropbox. And hey, guess what? It works because Leo happened to use the same password across multiple systems. And now I'm in, and now I have access to this data that I can exfiltrate, or I can sell on the dark web, or I can find other stuff in there and pivot. So that's an interesting thing to me. And I don't think the major identity players have figured out a way to do that. Now, I think there's different tools that you can get that will do it, but it's the integration of those things and finding a way to really know when someone leaves the organization, did I really cut off their access? And then let's say that you do know. Let's say that you do know that Susie had access to Dropbox. Who in my giant organization do I contact to say, hey, go please cut off Susie's access to Dropbox? Am I going to have to reach out to Dropbox directly? Is there a Dropbox admin in my organization? So how do you know that kind of stuff? So to me, that's an interesting challenge. I'd love to know what you think about it, Leo.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right that there isn't a single solution that talks to every other system that it's connected within a mesh to say, hey, this person's leaving the organization, cut all the access, and it goes tick, 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 just automates it. We've all been there, right? Someone's, as you said, left the organization, and again, someone's come back, or you'll see a notification someone's accessing a repository, and it's like, what's going on? Then you find out they've been actually using their personal repository the whole time they've been in the organization. So they obviously have source code and whatever else it may be. Someone kind of mentioned something similar to this, like non-human identities on a previous episode, or should I say, it will be a previous episode by the time it gets released, but it's almost like no one from the big identity provider is looking at this, let's call it shadow ID element. Maybe I've just created $1 billion industry there on the back of that, but how many IT functions or security functions are literally talking with HR, talking with people managers or hiring managers, whatever it may be, and looking at all the systems access, all the systems provisioning, then looking at mapping every single touch point that they have. I think an average employee probably has, let's say, a handful of systems that they're accessing that isn't behind single sign-on. So maybe they're using Canva or, something else. And it's like, again, how many times is someone using the same credentials to access a system? Back to your credential stuffing attack. I've seen it so many times working in B2B led companies where, let's say a end user is using the same login for 10 different systems. And then someone's like, hey, I'm going to try their bank details or try accessing a different system. For me, I think it's an absolute headache that no one's looking at. I think the big major trends at the moment are CSPM, CNAP, SIM, but no one's actually looking at the shadow ID element. Again, that's just my kind of 2 cents worth, but yes, it's an absolute headache to manage, especially if you have an organization with like 10,000 employees. How on earth how do you admin that? How do you then do a retrospective sweep if someone leaves? I know some organizations, they place like anything between 14 and 30 days to do a full sweep account. but that's not going to happen if you have an organization of 10,000 people. Even if you had 500 people, I doubt it really gets done. So again, I'll probably pass back to you, Andrew, in terms of if you have any tips that you would offer, or you've seen anything, or any products you want to name drop, by all means. I mean, I would love just a handful of products to deal with as a CISO, then everything's taken care of, but it's not as simple as that within a SaaS world. But please, yes, back to you.
So yeah, I think I want to, before I talk about products, and I have seen a couple I think that can help in this area. But so I want to think about it from an insurance and a regulatory perspective.
Perfect. Yeah.
Right. Because when you're filling out your cyber insurance, they're going to say, do you have a process that cuts everyone's access when they leave the organization? And you're going to say, yes, you're going to hit that checkbox. And you're going to think that you do. Right. But maybe, as you said already, people are going to have a handful of apps that they're using that are not going through single sign-on. Signing up for a SaaS application is so easy today. And there are some that literally require you to use corporate credentials. Like if you try and sign up for something with Gmail, it says, nope, you got to give me your corporate credentials to get in. So the replication of this, the number of things that are happening out there is huge. So from an insurance perspective, also from a regulatory perspective, think about SOX requirements. If you build your program based on ISO 27001 or CIS 18 or NIST CSF, these are key things in each of those that have controls about disabling access, leavers access, rotating access, all of those kind of things when people leave the organization. So you asked me about some vendors that I know. There's one company that I know that's called Savvy. And what Savvy does is, and they're focused on what they call SaaS identity sprawl.
Yeah.
And so they have a way through both browser plugins and email APIs to identify the SaaS applications that people are using, and they can compare that against what you have in your identity inventory. So they can tell you when Susie retires, okay, here's all the stuff that you cut off, here's the 5 or 6 other things that you have. And it can also tell you who are the admins of those things in your organization, if that exists. So it's not an easy button, but at least it's a list of stuff that you can go and figure out how to clean up.
And that's what we need. We need that insight. And because, you know, it's another point, the admins of these other systems that probably our main administrators don't even know anything about. And it's like, how many times do you have a budget owner and they're like, hey, there's $50,000 spent on systems, 2 people use it, but they integrate into like Salesforce or NetSuite, whatever it may be. And then it's like, well, who manages it when John and Janice leave the organization? You know, it's like, yeah.
How do you set up new admins for that? So absolutely. And then the other one, you touched on non-human identities.
Yeah.
So there's another company that I've been talking to called Oasis. They're focused on the proliferation of non-human identities. And they don't just focus on like APIs, because that's a big problem, but they're like any non-human. So generic accounts, service accounts, test accounts, APIs, whatever it is, how are you securing those non-human identities, and how are you like rotating the passwords or vaulting them or whatever it is that you do? And look, I've managed identity management before, and I've had non-human accounts that we looked at, but it was more of a manual process to do that than really a tool that looked at everything, that looked at all those key repositories and that kind of centrally managed it. And again, I think the big players out there in identity management are missing these 2 key areas. And if we think about zero trust and distributed model and, you know, the end of the edge and all that kind of stuff, identity becomes a huge factor. Yeah. Because how do you really prove who you are unless it's identity? And if those identities are not being managed well. The other thing, I think I said this already, but I'm going to say it one more time. If we look at the recent data breaches, these big ones, where people are getting in with social engineering, but once they're in, they're pivoting. And a lot of the times when they pivot, they're finding one of these non-human accounts or these SaaS accounts that people have forgotten about, and they're using those to then infiltrate the systems. And if Susie's account gets compromised before she retires, she's going to call somebody. She's going to say, hey, Lee, it's me, Susie. I'm about to retire next week, but something weird is going on with my email. But if Susie's gone and someone compromises one of her accounts, whether it's a generic account that she owned or a SaaS account that she's not looking at, then there's nobody to call. There's nobody to say, I have a problem with this. It's just someone can use it unfettered without anyone stopping it until bad things happen. So
Yeah, we've even seen a recent case of this where someone left an organization and changed their Slack profile to like a service bot or some Slack bot.
Yeah, Slack bot. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and it's like you apply that again to that lateralized movement of other systems. People don't know. I never got the memo that Susie had retired or whatever it may be, or Susie changes the naming convention in an admin account or in our actual email account to something else, and it's like John Smith. You know how many John Smiths will be in an organization, and then before you know, they'll just secretly just start to creep within the network or pivot between different SaaS solutions, and then before you know it, it's wild. I even read a case of a guy who outsourced his job to someone in China.
Yes, I read that too.
Yeah, he'd been away for like a year, and then they're kind of looking, oh no, that John or whatever his name is, hey, he's been fine, yeah, he's logging in. And I think he slipped up because he put something on Facebook. And that's how they caught him. They're like, isn't this guy supposed to be on vacation? And it's like, what's going on? You know, and then they started to look at it and realized that he hadn't actually been on any of the systems, but the person who outsourced it to was everywhere. Even system, well, I don't know, scope creep across multiple different platforms. Like the actual extent of it is now coming out that it was like, you know, yeah, sure, he was outsourcing the role, but this person was like, I like this system. I like this. Yeah, it's like more than just like waving a mouse on a Word document all day. So yeah, these things can be quite terrifying. But that's really good. You've mentioned a couple of products as well, just for reference for anyone. We're not endorsing these. These are just things that Andrew's come across, and I've heard of Oasis most recently. So these are actual problems that vendors are trying to solve. So definitely, I'm going to check them out. So yeah, moving on to probably our last topic then, Andrew, would be the one thing in cyber you think is BS and needs a focus on or needs to change.
So Leo, I thought about this question when you sent it to me the other day, and I think there are two things that are BS and need to change. So if it's okay with you, I'll try and cover both of those things.
Yeah, sounds good.
So I think the first one is the biggest cybersecurity companies that are out there. Okay, and I'm going to try not to name too many of them, but like the Palos and the Zscalers and the Ciscos. Let's start with them. Okay. So the problem with these companies is they are not innovating anymore. They give you a product, it has problems, there's nobody that you can go talk to about it. It just kind of, you get what you get, you're going to have to pay through the roof for this thing. And so there's this lack of innovation. So that's a big problem for me. And not only innovation, but kind of, good job at customer success, making sure you're happy, you're getting everything you need out of the product. They're more like, we're going to sell this thing, and then next year we're going to jack up your price, and we're not going to help you in any way. So that's kind of a pain point for me, and I think for a lot of my peers. Now, I do have a solution for that pain point. I believe that the solution is to work with early stage cybersecurity startups that are innovating in the space. A lot of times that means you can get a $100,000 solution for $20,000. So you put some innovation budget into your roadmap, and you find people who are solving a problem that you have. And the other part of it is you end up getting a very talented development team to work on your problem, right? To solve the problem that you have, where you'd never get funding to hire a development team to build a product for your security stack. But this way you're getting that. And by doing that, you not only help yourself and your team and your company, but you end up helping the entire cybersecurity ecosystem. You end up helping all of your friends. You end up helping every business that's out there, because you're helping to build a product that's going to help secure the whole ecosystem. So I think there's that lack of innovation. Now, I will say those big companies are buying startups, right? So they take that. But a lot of times what happens is you buy an innovative startup and then they go to Cisco to die. right? So all of this, the great stuff about them and the fact that you can help them make changes on the fly and everything, that all changes as soon as they get bought out. So there's a good and bad part to that, I guess. That's the first thing I think is broken. I'll give that one back to you if you want to make any comments before I go into part two of broken stuff.
I think you're absolutely spot on. That consumption model, just keep consuming. But you're right. I mean, like it's almost like they need to rebrand, I think, as well, to let people know that, hey, we've kind of plateaued. The only way for us to actually progress is consuming other companies. But I think one element there, the customer success and the customer service aspect of these big companies is gone. You know, the smaller companies I've worked for, or medium tier size, that support model was really vital. Working with companies that understand the problems we're going through and actually want to support us through. I'm going to name drop some that I think are absolutely been fantastic. Wiz, Gem Security, there's a lot coming out of Israel where it's just customer focus. They're consuming so much information where they want to help fix the problem for you.
Yep.
I mean, that to me is where the future of cyber is. And I think, back to your point, if these big companies were to incubate, that would make, again, back to the ecosystem, so much more diverse and better. And you would have more diversity with your developers. And again, that would create an innovation spark rather than just consuming and letting it die in the background, or stifling innovation because you don't want anyone else to have it. And it's like, becomes a pain. Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest companies in the world all have this problem. They're all hiring, big four advisors to come in and help them to build incubation hubs and things like that, because they realize that if you try and build within a large enterprise, all of the bureaucracy just stifles all of that growth. So, and the other thing I was thinking about is hiring people from startups, because they have this amazing mentality about, I can do anything, I can solve any problem, there's nothing that's too challenging for me. We recently hired someone who came from a startup, and she is incredible, right? She doesn't have any problem like learning new stuff or figuring this thing out, and it's that kind of ability to think outside the box, or just kind of think on your feet, that I think a lot of these startup folks have. And that leads me into my second thing that I think is broken. I think the second thing that I think is broken is hiring in the cybersecurity industry. So we talk about entry-level jobs that require 4 years of experience. So it's a chicken egg scenario. How do I get 4 years of experience without a job? How do I get a job without experience? There's no way to do that. And you can talk about things that you can try, but besides like an internship or an apprenticeship, I think a lot of those other things are iffy. There's a statistic that's been floating around the industry for a long time about 3.5 million or 4 million open cybersecurity jobs. I think that number is BS. I think the number is closer to maybe 300 or 400,000. If you look at how many jobs there are in the US and then you look at that worldwide, I think that might be a more realistic number. I think one of the ways to fix that, because I'm not going to just bring problems, I'm going to bring solutions, is looking at alternative talent pipelines like apprenticeships, like internships. One of the barriers to entry to a company is understanding company culture, understanding the people, understanding the processes. If you have someone who is an intern and then they go and graduate and they come back, you can hire them at a reasonable salary, right? So you're going to save money versus getting somebody with 4 years of experience. And at that point, they already know the team, they already know the environment, they already know the processes. So it's a win for everybody. And the same thing goes with apprentices. If you look at millennials today, a lot of people are not going to university anymore. They're not seeing the value in that, and all the student debt and all that stuff. So going to an apprenticeship program, like ones for cybersecurity, and then getting hired at a company, you can get them in at a very reasonable rate. And then if you want to convert them to an employee, again, pretty reasonable. And you get a diverse pipeline that you don't get by just going out to LinkedIn and posting jobs for 4 years of experience. So I think there are ways to fix it. I don't think we're doing those things very well yet. I don't think people really respect entry level, and not enough interns and apprentices, but I think there's some ways to fix it.
I completely agree. I think there's a fear when it comes to maybe cyber leaders or hiring managers, where they 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 probably build up the problem far too much in their head for what is actually going on. To be able to nurture someone and mold them in a way where that long term, the longevity of that individual, and also you'll have that loyalty as well, where you're investing in someone, the likelihood is they'll stay with a company. How many times have people been like, again, you need 5 years experience, 4 years experience, and it's like, and then they look at the resume and they're like, oh, you've just jumped between jobs, and it's like, well, maybe there's a problem, maybe the culture isn't enough to foster that within people to make them stay. And I think another issue is, we see this a lot. US is like, all these jobs start releasing visas. It's incredible. Like an example, maybe some time ago I was looking at jobs and it's like I'd quite like a crack at the US, and it's like you can't get a visa for, you get the sponsorship. I don't know if there's some political agenda behind that as well, but it's like
Rich.
that should be open. It should be like, hey, we've got 500,000 jobs for cyber. Look at the talent pools it would be in like Eastern Europe, UK, India, Pakistan, regions of Africa. There's people that are just, they'll live and breathe pen testing or network engineering. Back to apprenticeships, someone I have hired a couple of times, they started their apprenticeship with IBM. So they learned the hard way, maybe working with people that they're 50, 60 years old, dealing with mainframe and X whatever servers. And it's like, getting someone from that stage to then cloud native, is like an incredible journey. And they're already 10, 20 years ahead of most people I know that are just like graduating, like, I'm going to become a cloud engineer. And it's like, it's not as simple as that, so there's kind of many, many facets to it. But apprenticeships are, I think, something that needs serious investment, because again, it's a low cost yield, which again, I've seen people go for salaries 2-3 year experience at Fang, and they're just ridiculous, like, and it's like you could probably get 3 engineers for that, and nurture them and create a really good culture. But yeah, that's my take on it. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to unpack one word that you said really quickly. You said the word fear. And if you think about the way that getting approval for an open headcount works in a large enterprise today, once you've done all the work to get that approval, that fear is, if I use this headcount to hire someone who's not good enough, it's going to reflect poorly on me. It's going to reflect poorly on my team. It's going to reflect poorly on the business. So your motivator is, I'm going to use that to get the very best person, the most experienced person I could possibly get. And there needs to be a way to turn that around to say, look, instead of hiring one super unicorn architect, let me hire 2 apprentices or 3 interns or whatever it is, and bring those people in and have them attack the problem from a different point of view. And you can train them up, that longevity that you talked about, train them up to become super unicorn architects in the future. That's what you want to do, is that nurturing environment to bring up those people to the next generation of super unicorn architects.
Yeah, and speaking of unicorns, I actually worked with a co-founder many years ago, and their company became a unicorn, and he said unicorns should only hire unicorns. And what he meant with that was just unique individuals that could be a Swiss Army knife on anything. And I really liked that. That stuck with me through the years. And I think that's definitely an approach to hiring, because the non-conventional types will be the ones that 10x. They always 10x because they get momentum and then they unlock. And before you know it, David or Janice or whatever, they're learning multiple different skills at a point where you can have a small team, or you can just have a specific type of team that just do everything. And then they're the ones that save the day. But I guess everyone has their own problems on this. But yes, so Andrew, we will conclude today's episode then, if that's okay. And then I'd like to thank you for your time, Andrew. And I'm sure if anyone wants to follow you, you can plug your website here if you wish, and also LinkedIn. So I'll pass back to you for your website.
Sure. My website is cybersecurityintheboardroom.com. As Leo said, you can find me on LinkedIn, Andrew Wilder, pretty easy to find. But thank you very much. Great session today. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again, Andrew.